Me too. I am super excited to introduce my guest. She's an actress who's worked in television and film, both in Hollywood and the UK, for the past 21 years, starring in popular award-winning dramas such as Damages and Once Upon a Time. She's embodied a variety of roles from CIA villain to fairy tale princess. The role she's most proud of is that of a single mom to her 8-year-old son. In recent years, her passion and interest in psychology has led her to coaching, through which she supports and empowers other actors to step into their power and live their greatest potential. I want to welcome Anastasia Griffith to the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
So I created this podcast to inspire other artists to follow their dreams, right? If a kid like me can come out to Hollywood at 18 with $200 in my pocket, a one-way ticket, didn't know a soul out here, and be living the dream, then why can't that listener out there, right? If someone like you can, coming from the UK, can, take on Hollywood and walking the red carpet in the Emmys and working alongside, A-list actors like Glenn Close and William. I mean, you made the dream a reality. You know, if you can do it, they can do it. So, I'm super excited to have you on the show because you're doing some amazing work with coaching actors. And I just want to talk about your journey. Like when did you know that you wanted to be an actor? How'd you get started in the business?
Well, I think my story starts like many other people's story, which is there was a moment in childhood where I felt completely seen and appreciated. And it was 9 years old at school. I had 6 older brothers who were all doing their own thing. And I was never the most academic or the most sort of spectacular in any way. And there was this moment where I auditioned for Oliver Twist. And I went up for the role of the Artful Dodger. And I got the role. And I remember the morning after the first performance being stopped in the street where I lived in London by a mum who I didn't know, who had seen the performance the night before and had told me that I was incredible and that she'd loved my performance. And for me, I just suddenly, light bulbs went off in my head, like, this is it. I'd loved the whole process. I'd loved, the going to school and speaking in a Cockney accent for 3 weeks beforehand, because we had this wicked drama teacher who suddenly made me feel alive. I'd loved all the process. But it was that moment of like, I am seen and someone's appreciating me, that really the penny dropped for me. And that was that. I was completely addicted to the whole thing. I did come from a family where my mom had been an actress for a small amount of time, but she'd given it up to raise kids. My dad had married her when she was very young and had 4 sons already. So she stepped into being a mom very, very young. But her passion for it, I think, fed me. And it was a way that we connected in my childhood, and I could sort of earn her respect and her attention, So I think, like so many, it comes from a deep longing to connect to the humanity in all of us, whether that's through the storytelling itself or whether it's through the process of doing it, I hear it all the time, and I see it in the kids that I sometimes work with, children or my friends' kids, that when they step out there on that stage, it brings them to life, especially the ones who really get it. So that's how it began. And I never thought for in a million years that I could do it as a profession. And it wasn't until my big brother went off and did it as a profession that I was like, hold on a second, if he can go and do this, surely I can. And that's where it kind of began.
It's funny. We got similar story. I was 11 in school, and I come from a broken home, and my dad wasn't around, so I was a little boy that needed to be loved, and my mother was, kind of dealing with her thing. So there wasn't, the only way I really kind of felt loved was when I was like, putting on a show and performing, and I got a little pat on the back, and there was I was called hyperactive at school, and there was one teacher that saw something in me, and she would let me go from classroom to classroom and do my little performances. And then there was a play they were doing about music throughout the ages, and I got cast as Elvis Presley. And
Right.
but the amazing thing was is the teachers told all the students to write their fan mail to their favorite character. So Elvis got a shoebox full of mail. So that's when I really like felt like loved. I was like, look at all this mail. Like everybody, they would like love my performance as Elvis. What am I doing next? You know, and that's really what kind of set the hook in for me as a, wanting to be an actor.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, what I'm hearing us both say is that it was fulfilling a need that was being unmet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, ultimately, we can get into what I'm doing now in terms of the coaching, but that is always what we do as humans. We will find a way of meeting unmet needs because ultimately, an unmet need is a threat to survival. So we're just programmed to figure it out. And you and I found the path of least resistance that we're going to get our need met by performing, by telling stories, by being on a stage. Other people are creating other versions of meeting their needs. And I think what makes actors such incredible people, and I think one of my favorite things about the last 21 years of my life is the people that I've met along the way, the people that I get to call my colleagues and my friends. And I think what's incredible about actors is we tend to be what's called highly sensitive, right? Like we tend to be missing almost a filter to our nervous system where we can read other people so intricately, and they don't even need to say a word for us to know what's going on. I think other people would call this empaths, and I think most actors or artists, creatives, tend to be empaths. But what this does mean, it means that we're very vulnerable. It
Mm.
means that we're really sensitive to other people's judgments. We'll understand what's going on non-verbally, even when someone, if something is incongruent, we'll feel it. And then we go and put ourselves in this industry, which is challenging. And so a lot of what I love about the stories of how people become actors is that we were fulfilling or filling wounds. And we're not going to get heavy, but it's every human being has challenges and has adversity. And when we get underneath and get into what has brought us to these moments and really understand those subconscious beliefs that have brought us here, we can really take our power back and strengthen ourselves, even through that vulnerability, right? And use it as a superpower. So I've kind of gone into where the coaching took me, but what I love about these stories is that we've acknowledged the humanity in our journey. And it's about meeting these really core human needs of being loved and appreciated and seen and, you know.
But the thing is, for me, is I didn't, as an actor, I didn't know why I was doing it. Not until later on in my life where I started really doing some inner child work, healing that inner child, because, Billy had a rough life. If there was a checklist of everything that could possibly go wrong to a child, I check all the boxes.
Mm.
It was a very violent. There was a lot of abuse. So Billy's need to be loved was, I felt like, oh, this acting thing was going to fill that hole,
Yeah.
but then you get the success, and it was a great motivator, and it drove me to, jump on a plane, travel 3,000 miles, go to Hollywood, bang on the door, make the dream a reality. But when I had the fame and all the stuff that you think is going to make you happy, right? You got the dream, you got the TV series, you got the paycheck, you got the money, you got all that stuff. There was something missing for me. And I mean, I literally was on the set, like after, doing a taping, and I was sitting on the soundstage, and I was like, is this it? There
Yeah.
was something missing, and what I found is I was trying to fill a hole with acting, thinking
Yeah.
that that was going to make me whole, and
Yeah.
it doesn't. That's the work you have to do. You want to do it because you're passionate about it and you love it. And I believe me, I was very passionate, and I love the craft of acting. But it doesn't fix anything, for you. And if
No.
this business can even make it worse, because there's the rejection and all the stuff that goes along with, the career.
Yeah, I mean, my story is similar in that, um, I never expected to have a massive American television career, which for a few years there, that's what was going on. And I mean, I came out to the US and with, like you, 600 quid in my pocket. I'd sold everything, landed in New York, and 2 weeks later, I was on the set of Damages.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was very quick. Once I kind of made that intention to go for it.
Mm.
Um,
That's the
and
key.
yeah, it was a very clear intention. And I talk a lot in my coaching around, you really have to visualize it. You have to, it's almost the archaeology of your brain. You have to use that imagination to put yourself exactly where you want to be. And I had this amazing skill of doing that. And for a few years, it was all new and really filled me up. And then there was this moment where I realized, what, wherever I go, there I am.
Mm.
And that longing to be acknowledged was filled in that moment of like, you got the role. And then I'd be really pumped for about 24 hours. And then I'd have this sort of fear would set in. Oh, I'm not good enough. These internal like stories
Mm.
about, that would begin to sort of pull me down. And I would realize that I just wasn't actually very happy, even though I was living this dream. And it was then that I started doing this work in psychology. I started studying psychology. I started doing the spiritual work. I started trying to understand the subconscious mind, trying to understand what was going on energetically that I wasn't satisfied, because I knew it wasn't going to come from the outside in. And through that journey, I've realized, one, that what I wanted more than anything was a child. What I wanted more than anything were these deep, deep relationships that for me had felt undoable. And so I've kind of almost backward engineered it. And I've been like, right, okay, I'm going to really go for these core needs and really go to meet these core needs and rebuild the part of me that doesn't feel like it's possible or doesn't feel like I'm worth it. Soothe them, heal them, do the inner child work, do the shadow work, which I can explain a little bit more about what that is if anyone's interested. But
I'm
do all
interested.
of that and then come back in and enjoy all of the trappings of this incredible business, which isn't at fault for any of this. But I do think like the glitzy lights and the big promises can pull people to it in the hope that they're going to fill those holes that both you and I discovered. Um, but the industry itself is not going to do that. But we need to do the beautiful work to understand what it is to be human, so that we can tell the stories of these human characters and hopefully take the audience on that similar journey.
It sounds like we've been on a similar journey, because for me it was, listen, when I have a beautiful 16-year-old son, and the greatest role that I've ever played is the role of father. Now I get to be the father that I didn't have. Now I get to be the husband that my father wasn't around. So all the stuff that happened to me, now I know it happened for me. It was all a gift. It made me who I am today. It made me the father I am, the teacher I am. But when I at 40 years old, when I had my son, I was like, it's not about me anymore. Acting was about me, ego, me. And then when it stopped being about me, it's about my son. It's about my wife. It's about my family. It's about love. It was a game changer. It wasn't, I was like, there were things that happened, in my life that really changed the course of my life. I was dealing with a lot, like my 10 years ago, before I opened up the studio, I was dealing with a lot. I lost my 11-year-old niece to brain cancer. I lost my stepfather to prostate cancer. My wife and I had a miscarriage. My dog ran out and got hit by a car. My wife got diagnosed with breast cancer. I mean, it was like the world was, and this happened in a 1 year period. Like everything was beating me up. I couldn't work. I tore my arm, my rotator cuff, and my labrum. I was in a sling. I was out of work. Like, it couldn't, it was just the worst time ever for me. And, during my wife's healing journey, she's cancer free, thank God. But, during her journey, she wanted to, uh, you know, become a yoga teacher and meditation. And she'd come home from her yoga teacher training in bliss, and I'm sitting melting down on the couch. And she's like,
Yeah.
you really should try this meditation thing, you know? And I was like, yeah, well, like I'm going to be able to turn off the noise in my brain. But, you know, I turned to that and I went and I did my teacher training, and it was life changing, you know, to
Yeah.
to to really learn how to breathe and to get out of my head, you know, the monkey brain, the noise that's going
Yeah.
on, that little voice of that little broken child that's, you know, going to tell you fear and you're not worthy and, you know, all those things, and learning how to shut that down. And it seems to me that that's the kind of work that you're doing, subconscious mind work and stuff like that. So I'd love to talk about
Yeah.
how how you shifted in your journey, you know, what you were going through, and having, you know, to find your path to what you're doing now and to becoming, you know, the mom that you are and the teacher that you are and the actor that you are. So what was that journey?
It really began just around the time I was doing damages. I remember calling a really good friend of mine and saying to her, I'm not happy. And she was like, I'm going to do this silent meditation retreat and you're going to come with me. And I was like, I'm not sitting in silence for a week. Are you kidding? Anyway, we went off to this thing called the Art of Living, which is an Indian organization with a guru. And they introduced to the Western world some really great practices that are quite palatable to us. And I sat in silence for 5 days. And that was the beginning of the journey of realizing the chatter in my brain, like really beginning to start becoming the watcher of that experience and not be the experience itself. Um, so that's the first step that I begin with clients, is like an actual practice of a process that can quite quickly allow them that experience of taking a step back and witnessing that we are not the experience we're having. We're something else. We are the witness of it. And therefore, we can hold so much more than we think we can. And we can separate ourselves from the pain, the physical sensations, and the thoughts, right? And then from that point, I was building my acting career at the same time as building my sort of existential experience of spirituality and these practices. But it wasn't until I'd really had a lot of success, and I was dating this guy who ended up revealing that he was living a double life. Essentially, he was with someone else at the same time. And our whole life was based on lies and deception. And I remember getting this email from his girlfriend, who he'd been with for a long time. And I remember my body just hitting the floor. And I'd never had such a dramatic experience before, where my whole body just collapsed. And I think it was about a year after that, I started developing all sorts of illnesses. I had Hashimoto's, I had Lyme's disease, I had all this stuff. It was my body just shutting down. And it was the physical manifestation of the emotional, psychological experience that I'd been putting myself through for years, of overriding myself, pushing myself. I'd had experiences on set that had not been okay, but I hadn't processed them. I'd had, you know, all sorts going on. I'd had eating disorders. I was so hard on myself. You know, I'd see myself on camera and the internal dialogue was just hideous, you know. And now I look back at that lovely 33-year-old girl and think, you know, she was gorgeous and she was doing amazing work. And I just couldn't see any of that. And it was in this year, this sort of trauma that, like you said, I look back on now and I am so grateful for. I'm like, if that hadn't happened, I'd have kept riding this wave of numbness, and not really never acknowledged, you know, what was really going on, which was dissociation. You know, I was being inauthentic. I wasn't in my body. And I was being driven by my subconscious mind. And now, I don't know how much, you know, your audience is aware of this sort of conversation around quantum physics and manifestation, but the idea is we are 5% conscious decisions and 95% subconscious, which means that most of what we do, our behaviors, our choices, even our thoughts and our actions, are driven by a part of us that was programmed way back in childhood, mostly between the ages of 0 and 8. And at that time, our brains are such that they are just downloading information. And the information is telling our whole nervous system, our whole body, how to survive in the environment that we were born into. So specifically your tribe, your family. So for someone like you, you had a lot of adversity that you had to overcome. Now, some of that download would have protected you brilliantly, and it would have created a resilience that has allowed you to come to Hollywood and have the bravery to do the incredible things that you've done. Some of it would not be helpful. It would be things like, I'm not worthy of X, Y, and Z, or I don't experience love, or there are negative and positives that come out of this, but your subconscious is always trying to protect you so you will survive. So what we actually have to do when we want to start to take our power back from some of the programming that we have received that may not be helping us, for me, it was a lot about my self-worth. I'm not interesting. I was the youngest of 7 kids and the only girl. I mean, no one in my family wanted to play with me. There was a lot that I downloaded, which is not, a sob story. It's just the facts. I downloaded, I'm not very interesting. If I'm going to get attention, I have to have a problem. That was a big one for me. Like, I would go into victimhood to try and get attention. So I was always creating problems. I was always creating, illnesses or breakups or drama in my life, because that's how I received love. And so in order to take my power back from this subconscious, I had to ultimately become very aware of what it was telling me. And so what I do with clients is I use a process called EFT tapping along with some other modalities, but EFT allows us to go into the subconscious mind by using the body, right? And memory. And so I'll take people through a journey where we'll go into a very current situation. Maybe it's nerves going into an audition, or maybe it's breakup scenarios, or maybe it's self-worth. Maybe they're overeating, or they've got eating disorders. And we'll go into how they feel in the body when they're in a certain scenario. And we'll start tapping, and we'll give ourselves unconditional love for that experience that they are having in that moment. I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. And so you're creating that safety for them to go into an experience that's quite uncomfortable, and you're holding space for the part of you that you would normally try and deny, the part of you that you're going to try and squash down or ignore, that's screaming for your attention. And for me, it was definitely, there was an inner child in there that was screaming to be heard. And so in that process, I'll take them safely in, and inevitably at some point in that process, I'll say, and they're quite deep at this point, when was the first time you ever remember feeling this? And within moments, they will be like, I'm 3 years old, I'm sitting here, I'm doing this, or I'm at my locker at school, and X, Y, and Z has happened. And you're now beginning to get to the root cause of this pattern that has been playing out in their lives and in their adulthood for years. And through going in and then meeting the need that part of you is feeling unmet in, you can sort of step up as your sort of higher self, as the witness, to hold space for the part of you that has this wound. And by doing that, you can then soothe that particular pattern. But then we go into a process where we start to use our imagination to create the experience that is more supportive. And it's a sort of hypnotic experience at this point, because really to change the subconscious, it's 2 things. It's repetition or it's hypnosis, right? So you need to, as an adult, going back and refiring different synapses, i.e. creating new patterns in the brain, you have to go in and repetitively visualize, see a different scenario, show up for yourself, create safety, and then focus on where you want your life to go. And through that, I've created this process that we can do within 20 minutes that will really support people to get to the root, but then also really design how it is they want to show up in an audition, and how do they want to feel when they're on set. And how do they want to feel with the partner that they would like to meet? You know, what is that going to feel like for them? So that they can begin to step into healthier habits and patterns that will lead to the next action, that will lead to the next outcome.
Love that.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I do a lot of similar work with my actors. I like to dig around a little bit, kind of figure out what they have, what stories they're holding on to, because I know for me, I have had so many stories, I'll give
Yeah.
you a perfect example. When I was a little boy, my mother used to drag me to the mailbox and open it up and go, look, your father doesn't send child support. So that little boy would bring a whole lot of story, a whole lot of meaning to that, right? Like, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve money. I don't deserve, my father doesn't love me. I mean, like, so much. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on
Yeah.
about stories that were created around just a woman and a child walking to a mailbox, opening it and closing it. I mean, that's what happened. But the story that I created, I carried around with me for a long time. So when I did have success in Hollywood, well, guess what? When I got that big paycheck, star of the show paycheck, I was flying to Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas and pissing it away on a roulette table. But when I had a woman in my life that loved me, I was sabotaging that love because I felt like I wasn't worthy of the love. I didn't deserve the love. So I was letting little Billy's story run. And, but little Billy said it's a bullshit story. It's a story the little boy created, a damaged little boy created, but that's not the truth. So I like to, dig around and figure out, okay, what's the truth, and change the story. You know,
Yeah.
for me, I had stories of abandonment. Like my mother used to, my mother had to work 3 jobs to support me and my 2 sisters. She was doing the best. She was young, trying to do the best she could with what she had. And she would bring me to a woman to take care of me. My mother told me she didn't see me till I walked. So, when the woman, your father abandons you and your mother doesn't see you till you walk, you grow up with some abandonment issues.
100%. And your mum is doing the absolute best she can in
She
that
could.
scenario. So this isn't about, we're never in the blame game. This is just about no one gets through childhood or life without adversity. And in fact, if you do, you're not growing. If you do, you're not actually having to face yourself, because the human experience is one of separation. We come into this world as part of this woman's body, and then birth in itself is a separation. So it is part of the human experience that we will experience pain. It's just how we allow ourselves to process that. And I actually started my coaching working as a parent coach because I'm so passionate about these first 7 years. And then it was only recently I was like, you know what? The people that I love the most, the ones that I really want to support are actors, because I think we're such a unique tribe of people. Um,
Mhm.
like I said, I think we're very sensitive, and I think we're doing incredible work in the world. But I know so many who struggle. I know so many who are fragile. And I think the irony that we go into this incredible industry, but one that comes innately with massive challenge. Even the most successful of us are hearing no all the time. We're experiencing rejection on a daily basis. So whether you have that as a core wound before you come into this business, or whether it's something that you develop because of the business, we better have some skills and tools to navigate it. It's not to say that it's unhealthy and it's bad. The business doesn't do it to us on purpose. It's just a very busy environment with lots of people who want to do this incredible work. And so my thing is, let's not demonize the business that we live in, but let's give ourselves the strategies and tools so that we can thrive, not just survive, right? And through it, through the adversity that we experience in this business, we can become healthier, happier people in general, because the work that we do will impact our relationships, not just for us, but I know now, I've recently gone into a relationship for the first time. I was single for 8 years after having my son, and very recently started a relationship again. And the person who's in a relationship now, having done this work over the last 10 years, versus the one who was in the relationship in her early 30s, is just a different human being. And that's impacting him, right? It's impacting how he shows up. It's impacting how he shows up with his kids, because it's all skills. It's all interpersonal skills that we may or may not have ever been taught. And so the one thing that I feel like what you do that I don't do is I'm not doing acting classes. I'm not teaching anyone to act or even flex that muscle. What I want to do is come in and do the emotional resilience work, right? Do the psychological work of like, right, let's maximize, like, let's get you so in the game that you're clearing out all the shit. So when you go in and do that audition, you're such a clear vessel, you're so authentic, you're so getting out of your own way that your success rates are going to go up. Your success rates in relationships are gonna boom. You know, you're gonna have better relationships with your children. Like, whatever success means to you, that's what I'm talking about. And it's not just, you know, the paycheck or the booking the roles. It's like, how do you create a successful life? And there's no better place for me to put my energy in this, I think, than with actors who are constantly telling the human experience to everyone around the world, right? Let's empower these people.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're storytellers. You know, we're storytellers, but we're also, you know, for me, I figured out that I was telling myself the wrong story. Like, you know, around events and in my life, I was, you know, for like to go back to that story where my mother dropped me off at that lady's house. You know, that was a story of abandonment. Like, oh, my mother is abandoning me. But now when I look back at it, I changed the story to, my mother loved me so much that she knew she was not capable of taking care of me. So she put me in the hands of somebody who could. That's a
Absolutely.
that's a better story to tell myself than abandon or me the victim or I'm not worthy. You know, I am worthy. I'm worthy of love, you know, money, all that stuff. Everything that's mine by divine right. I deserve it and it's mine. And if you step into your power and you know who you are, you know, this bag of bones called Billy is not who I am. You know, I'm a king. You know, this beautiful light within me, love. You know, I'm, you know, created a masterpiece. There's nothing wrong with me. I used to walk around thinking there was something wrong with me. I was damaged, but you know, and I tell my actors this all the time that they have to step into their power and know who they are. They're not their thoughts. They're not this bag of bones. You know, they're not, you know, they're this beautiful light, love, peace, joy, you know, and if they can come into an audition scenario, not in fear, but coming in, shining their light, stepping into their power and knowing who they are and coming and being, I love acting and this is my chance to act. And it's not about getting the part. It's about me coming in and playing and having fun. And, you know, those casting directors have a problem and I am, you know, the solution to their problem and you're
I
welcome.
love that. I
And,
love
and
that.
coming from that kind of energy, that light, love, right? Love is the highest vibration there is, right? And if you come from that, you know, people are going to be magnetized. They're going to be want to work with you because there's something about you that's your star power. Yeah, you want to do the work and all the choices and as an actor, but that's the cherry on top when you own who you really are and come in shining your light, not in fear, but in faith. I'm here to play.
Yeah, 100%. It's very, very, very magnetic. And when you dig into, you know, I don't really deal with sort of manifestation. Manifestation is a very big buzzword at the moment. But the reality of when you can step into your power and be fully present because you're not being taken off in all these different directions by the subconscious thoughts that are just not helpful in the space. You're not having tics in your face because you're nervous and you're really in your healthy parasympathetic nervous system, even when you've got the spotlight on you. And you're in that presence, you can tell the story. You're a clean vessel to tell the story that you have prepared, that you have you know, that you've created from reading the script, from doing the work what they do with you. But it's that presence, and that presence in itself is just, it is magnetic. It's the thing that when you see a master on screen and you can just connect the humanity in their eyes, it's because of that presence and they've gotten out of their own way. But also, when we talk about, you know, I'm a big fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you know his work.
Yeah.
But I'm a big, big fan. And the reason why is because, yes, he's doing the manifestation work, but he's doing it on a very scientific level. And it's this resonance between the imagination and the heart. And when you really visualize and put yourself in the worth of what it is you want, when you really resonate with, you know, I am in I'm in my body. I'm holding hands with the man of my dreams. I'm on the beach, and you're working with the energy of what it would be to be in that person's body in that life. You do inhabit that in, you open your eyes, you come out, and you do inhabit that in the next choice you make, or the next interaction you have with your kid, or the next audition that you go to. And in that, you change the identity that you're stepping into. And ultimately, this is the work that I do. It's like, yes, it's subconscious work, but we create identities for ourselves as that we hold on to very tightly. Like I said, it's always about survival. And sometimes to even step out of that identity feels like a threat, because for us human beings, homeostasis is safe. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't, even if it's a hard experience. But when you slowly break through and shift the identity that you are aligned with, and you can begin to see yourself as an actress who's walking the red carpet at the Emmys, and you're in your body and you're calm and you own it. Or you're walking into that audition and you're going up for the role of X, Y, and Z, and you just fully step into the energetics of that character, and you feel what it feels like to be nailing it and to be getting this incredible energetic feedback from the casting director. And, stepping into that reality will mean that in the next moment when you're practicing your audition, or you go into that next meeting, you will carry some of that identity with you. And the idea is, over the time that we work together, or over the time and I'm still doing this for myself, but through the work, you recreate the identity that you resonate with. And then the world will meet you there, because we'll believe what other people tell us they are, right? And we're reading people all the time on an energetic level. And so it's about creating that identity that you can really step into and own and live with every piece of your imagination, and then making that your reality.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You talked about, when you first came out and you booked the job 2 weeks in, for damages. I mean, so, I'm a true believer. I mean, I have a lot of proof that, your imagination, seeing yourself there already, and then going after it, like
Yeah.
relentless, with a vengeance. I'm going to go get this, right? Taking massive action in the direction of what it is that you want.
Yeah.
What is what makes the dream, the hard work, but makes the dream a reality. I give you a perfect example. When I was 16, at the height of my juvenile delinquency, I was literally like, I had ran away from home. I was back in my mother's custody. I was sitting on a couch. I was watching a TV show, and it was a show called The Fall Guy with Lee Majors, and it was about Hollywood and stuntmen and stuff like that. And I was living in this world of trauma and stuff like that. But I was watching that show, and I said to myself, I'm going to do that. And I saw myself doing it. It was all like behind the scenes Hollywood and stuff. And I saw myself doing it. When I got out to Hollywood and I banged on every door in Hollywood, and I finally found some rinky-dinky agent that was willing to send me out on my first audition. Well, guess what that audition was? It was for The Fall Guy. And guess what? It was a guest starring role. And guess what the character's name was? Billy.
It was
Uh,
yours.
it's like, the universe said, oh, okay, this is what you
Yeah.
want. And literally, it's like I got that part, I got my SAG card, and I was off to the races. It's like I climbed into my television, and there I was on the set
Yeah.
with, Lee Majors, that I grew up watching on the $6 Million Man, and, The Fall Guy, and
Yeah.
Heather Thomas. And it's like, there I was. And it's like, how did I get here? Well, it was my thoughts that I said I'm going to do it. And I
It's
believed that
also
I could
the
do it.
power of the emotion that you felt in that moment. You were in such a dire moment, and it was such a connection that you had to that show at that time. Like, I am going to do that. It was the strength of the feeling, I believe, matched with the imagination. One or the other, it doesn't have the same power. And I have a very similar story, if I could share it, about having my son. It was really a year after all that drama had happened. And I knew my son's father, but we weren't dating. And it had been my birthday, and he drove me to this yoga studio so I could do a class on my own with this incredible yoga teacher in Santa Monica. And in that class, had you on the mat thinking, really imagining what it is you wanted. And for me, I had this incredible sensation of love rush over me. And I just saw this little boy sitting with his back to me on the beach, cross-legged. And he had sort of sandy, dark brown hair and buttery skin. And I just felt so strongly this love and this belonging. I was his mother, and I felt what that was like. 2 weeks later, to the day, I was pregnant with that little boy. And
Wow.
when that boy arrived, and I had been told that I would have trouble conceiving, that pregnancy would not be possible for me. My son's father and I were together for a very short amount of time. We both believed that we were brought together simply to bring this soul into the world because he was just coming through. And then it was about a year and a half after he was born, I was sitting on a beach and his back was to me, and I was like, oh my God,
Yeah,
it was
there it is.
him. But
Yeah.
it's the strength of the emotion. And when you talk about there were a few moments in my career where I knew, I mean, the big ones that I always knew that I'd got them. And I knew because I'd gone in there with a particular kind of an energy where I talk about going into the architecture of my brain, which is really this identity thing, where I had the ability to connect with that character on an emotional and an imaginative level that I almost kind of stepped into. And it happened with like the 3 biggest jobs that I've done. And I remember walking out of that room and being like, there's just no question. Like, I knew it was mine. And I didn't know where this power or this ability had come from. And there's a few moments in my life where I look back and it's like, it just punctuate my life. And of course, there were so many auditions that didn't go that way,
Mhm.
where the thought and the fear and the imposter syndrome came in. And so, look, I don't think it's something that is just meant to be. I think you can take the power, but I think you need to be in a primed nervous system state. I think you need to have done the right preparation. And for whatever reason, on those occasions, it just really connected and resonated.
Mhm.
But it's real and it's powerful. And if we're going to break through in this industry where, the odds are against us, right? We've got to do extraordinary things to really believe that we're capable of it and that we're worthy of it and that it's ours and that we get to enjoy it.
I agree. Let's
Yeah.
talk about imposter syndrome and nerves and
Yeah.
auditioning and stuff like that. How do you deal with that?
Well, I have this tool called EFT tapping, which is mind-blowingly effective for the nervous system. So I personally always use that. Like, for a while, I went through some serious anxiety, and it was there that I found EFT. Someone suggested that I do it, and it would take me down from panic attacks. But when you're going into an audition, it's an amazing way of getting really present. It
Can you give
uses
me an example?
Well, yeah, because what it does, EFT tapping, it's called emotional freedom technique, and it uses the meridians in the same way that acupuncture does. But we don't need needles. We can tap on the end points of those meridians. So it's like the energy superhighway of the body. And when you're nervous, this is all really frayed, but also you're meeting yourself where you're at. So you start by tapping on this point here, which is called the karate chop point, the side of the hand. And you'd be tapping there and you say, even though I feel really scared and I can't take a deep breath because I'm about to go into this audition and I don't think that I'm good enough to get this part and I'm going to be exposed, I love and accept myself completely just the way I am. And you do that 3 times, tapping on this point. And then I would just go around tapping on the points that I know to tap, which are the inside of the eye, the outside of the eye, underneath the eye, under the nose, under the mouth, collarbone, under the arm, and the top of the head. And what this does is just regulate the nervous system. It allows us to go into the sensations that are uncomfortable, that we're trying to avoid. We know now that when you're trying to avoid an emotion, it will get bigger because it's trying to be heard. When you go into it and meet it face on where it's at, you almost go into it like it's a bubble or like you're a little earthworm going into the soil. The thing pops and dissolves. And on the other side of that, you've got presence and stillness, and you can actually be back in your body. Because what's happening when you're nervous, you've gone into fight flight, you're actually dissociating from your body. It's a physiological response, and you have to meet your body's needs in that moment because your body thinks it's about to die, like it has to run. So rather than running, you're going to sit and you're going to be with the sensations that are coming up, be present with it rather than turning your back on it. So then you can find some point of stillness. But I would also always say before an audition, there is work to be done in terms of the visualization and in terms of getting into the skin and the energy of the character. So after you've done that grounding, then I would really use the emotion. I would use a visualization with your mind and your heart to really step into the experience that that character's having. So you're now out of your experience and into theirs, right? And that's what I would call embodiment of the character.
Do you do breath work with that?
Yeah, you can do breath. I mean, I do box breathing when I feel out of body or I'm feeling nervous. But what you'll find is when you go around and you do the tapping, your breathing settles on its own. But I'm a big fan of breath work too. Absolutely. It's an incredible tool.
What is your advice to actresses out there that are breaking into the business, or maybe they're in the game and maybe they're frustrated because their career is not going exactly the way they want it to go?
Get real. You know, take radical responsibility for the stories you're telling yourself. I think one of the hardest things to tell people is that on some level, you're getting what you want. And that sounds really messed up. But when we begin to ask ourselves, what are you gaining from the situation that you're in? Really looking at how you're protecting yourself, then you might start to realize that even if it's not what you say you want, on some level, you are being successful at meeting your own need. So if you're in Hollywood, you're in LA, you're going for auditions and it's not happening, asking yourself, what is it I'm afraid of? What am I afraid will happen if I do book that job? What am I afraid will happen if I am a huge success? And when I did this for myself, I realized that I was absolutely terrified of going to the next level, because if I had been that bit more famous or that bit more well-known, I'd have been hounded by press. I'd have been bitched about in public. I'd have had so much criticism, because that's what happens. And I knew I couldn't cope with it. I knew that my ego was too fragile, that my self-esteem was too fragile. So I was really protecting myself from the step up, right? I had friends who were there. It was tough. I also realized after that massive breakup, because my career started to fall apart a little bit at that point. And as I said, I had some health issues. I realized I had made the connection that that guy had been with me because I was on television and I was rich. And so I did the very best I could for the following couple of years to never be on television and not make any money.
Mm.
I started breaking out in hives, like my appearance changed. It was a way of protecting myself from predators. And so I had to go in and do that subconscious work, create that safety for myself and just tell myself a different story. And then you start surrounding yourself by different kinds of people, and you start choosing different kinds of men. And suddenly your story gets to be different, right? You start going down a different path. For me, that meant I became a mom, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I made some different choices. I still do act, but I do it more on my own terms, and my son always comes first. So, you know, it's not easy because you can't be in a hotel in Vancouver for 6 months. But we're figuring it out. And I think now we're getting back on the road, and he's going to come with me and do some homeschooling, and we're going to reinvent it. But it's on my terms, and it's aligned with my values and what I want my life to be about. So it's just, you know, if you're struggling, asking yourself what you are protecting yourself from, and getting really quiet and really real and listening to what the answer might be.
It's beautifully said. But, the self-sabotage, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've done it, I know what that is, that getting to that, oh, then everybody's going to know me, or people are going to, really see me, or, that imposter syndrome, or, it's all that noise coming from that little child, that little
Yeah.
voice saying that you're not good enough. And who are you to, have this stuff and be this, but it's just really, truly noise. And
Mhm.
it's being able to like kind of guard the gates of your mind and put a little bodyguard standing at the gates. So when that little voice starts coming and telling you, that those lies, you go, no, 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 no. You can't
Yeah.
come in. You know,
Yeah.
the big
I
me
think
is
that's
coming.
an amazing amount of awareness. And I don't know if people are always aware of the voice even. And I think that's the tricky thing about the subconscious is it's there to be subconscious.
Hmm.
And so I think it was Carl Jung, the psychologist, who said, you've got to make the subconscious conscious, or it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And that is the backbone of everything that I do. And so partly that's, it's deepening that awareness of what are the stories you're telling yourself. And then going in and reparenting, like loving that little boy, loving that little boy who's still in there. He'll never go away. But he just doesn't get to have the loudest voice, right? Or for me, loving the little girl who thinks that she's broken and not interesting, right? Going in and just holding her in that. And I
Yeah,
do that. I wake up every morning and check in, like, how are you doing today? What do
that's
you need
beautiful.
from me? Like, what do you need from me? Because now I have the experience of being a mum. I know how I want to turn up for my own kid. And so I do that periodically as a routine for myself. Because let me tell you, I'm 45 years old. I've just started a new relationship. And oh my God, the sabotage is still there. I
Mm.
still want to create fights because I want to push him so he can tell me I'm safe. Like, and he's got his own shit, and it's just not going to work. So thank God I've got these tools, because there've been a number of moments where I'm like, do you know what? I'm gonna step away for 2 minutes. I'm gonna go and take care of whatever the fuck is going on here, because I want to pull this house down right now. I want to destroy everything. And I'll go and do that, and I'll go and do my little process, and I'll come back and I'll be like, I'm so sorry. That wasn't about you. And we can have a sort of humorous conversation about what the fuck I was telling myself in that moment that was so close to trying to sabotage this whole beautiful thing that we're both trying to build. So I'm not saying that we will get to a point where the sabotage never happens. Our patterns are strong, and they're
True.
there because they want to save us. But we can begin to recognize them, and our awareness can get stronger and stronger and stronger. And we can get the skills to go in and be like, do you know what? I'm going to love all parts of me. And that's really what I'm talking about here. How do you love all parts of you so you can show up more powerfully in the present moment and not be reacting to what happened in the past?
What is your morning routine? Do you have a morning routine?
Yeah, I've got a 8-year-old kid, so it's not what I'd love it to be. But once I've packed him off to school, and if I get a moment before that, I wake up, I check in with my internal dialogue, which for me is my inner child. I soothe her, I tell her I love her, and I'm like, what do you need from me today? And I'll just listen more than anything. I tend to have more a nighttime routine, because once my son's in bed, I've got that time, and I get in a bathtub almost every night of my life. I live in the UK, so we're allowed to do that here. And I do tapping. I lie there and I do what's called inner child tapping, where I check in with what's going on. There's inevitably fear. There's inevitably something happening in the relationship or financially or whatever it is. And I check in and I hold myself, and I go into the experience I'm having in that moment through the tapping, and I go back and back and back, and I eventually get to the root cause of that fear, and I will soothe it through
Mm.
the EFT thing. Yeah.
Love that. So if somebody out there that's listening to this wants to learn more about what you do or be coached by you, how can they connect with you?
My website is anastasiagriffithcoaching.com, and I'm on Instagram as the Anastasia Griffith, and people can DM me, message me. I'm very available. I want to speak to the community. I now coach one-on-one and group sessions on this particular material. But I'm coming out to LA in April, and I would really love to go in and support people in person in various classes and workshops and things like that. I want to feel in connection with the community that you're serving and that I know in Los Angeles.
Well, when you're here in April, I mean, I'm going to be producing a movie. I'm not sure exactly where, but if I'm here, I would love to have you come and talk to the actors and maybe do a workshop. That would be great.
I would love to do that. It would be such a pleasure to be in person with these wonderful people.
Last question. So if you could go back and give some advice, life advice to the younger you, what would that be?
Yeah. I think I'd go back. Well, the first thing I'd say is you're perfect just the way you are. Um, but I think I would just want her to know that she is in control of her own experience, that she's not a victim to the world around her, that she can take her power back and change how she's feeling in any given moment.
Beautiful. I can't thank you enough for coming on to the podcast and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. Thank you so much for reaching out. And
That's my pleasure.
I
Thank you so
know
much for having me.
I know it was last minute. I said, "Can you jump on today?" And you said, "Yep." And here we've done it. So I'm very grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a total pleasure.